Hello everyone, I'm Oliver Villar from Blendtuts.com, and this time we're going to see the basics of animation in Blender. First of all, we are going to switch to the animation workspace not because it's the most comfortable one, because probably depending on how you use Blender you prefer a different distribution, but because it shows exactly the tools that we are going to see in this tutorial, which are the basics tool for animation, including the timeline, how to insert keyframes and all that, how to manage keyframes in the Dopesheet and the graph editor with the curves. And finally, at the end of the tutorial, we will make a practical exercise using all of the knowledge that we learn in this tutorial, which will be the most basic animation exercise that you can find everywhere, which is the typical bouncing ball. But it allows you to use the tools that we learned in this tutorial to make it work and to understand them better. So I just created this scene, and with a sphere I deleted the camera and everything. So we have this sphere up here and we are going to animate it bouncing in this floor. But before we proceed to the animation, we're going to see the tools that we have for animation. Basically in Blender we have more tools than what we are going to see in this tutorial, but we're going to see only the basic ones. The other ones are more advanced and we're not going to cover them in this tutorial. So first of all, we go here to the workspaces and we select the animation one that comes by default with Blender. Alright, as you can see, it shows more or less the basic interface with a little camera view here. But as I deleted the camera from the scene, we are just using a user perspective here. And also the main difference with the default interface is these two windows here. The first one is the Dopesheet that we are going to see later, and this one is the curve editor, the graph editor, as it's called in Blender, is this one. Also, another thing that we will see later is that a lot of people ask me, people that comes from other softwares like 3ds Max or Maya, that they can move and scale keyframes into the timeline directly, and they say me that in Blender that's not possible. Well, that's not completely true, because this is the basic timeline, alright, for controlling the time, the animation duration and all that stuff. But the cool thing about Blender is that it allows you to use every panel as you want. So you can use a Dopesheet right here and have like a timeline, but allowing you to change the keyframes along the time. So we will see that later also. So first of all, let's see how to create keyframes. The first method to create keyframes is pressing I, and this menu will show up with where you want to place a keyframe, in which channel of the object. Location, rotation, scaling. In this case, I will add it into the location, rotation, and scale. Right, so this adds a keyframe into every channel of the object. Alright, so here you can see that some keyframes have been stored. We will see this later. What does it means, because it shows up like 4 keyframes, and well, later we will see what's that. Here you can see also 2 little dots, orange dots, that represents keyframes in the curve editor, and down here you can see a little marker in yellow that shows that there we have a keyframe in the selected objects. Alright, so the next step is to establishing another keyframe. That is, for example, let's move the ball so it's placed over the floor like this. This is not the final animation that we are going to do in the practical exercise at the end of the tutorial, but you know, for showing you how to establish keyframes and all that, I'm going to already create some of the keyframes that we will need in that animation. So load rod scale again, and you can see that we have another keyframe. Here we have another keyframe, and here we already have a curve which defines the motion. Alright, here if we click and drag over the timeline, we can see the movement that the sphere does. Now another way to animate is to activate this little record button that we have here, and this is the automatically record keyframes. So we can go to here to another keyframe, move the object, and you can see that it automatically stored another keyframe right here and here too. So it's probably very useful when you are making a lot of animation, but if you are not only animating, be careful with this button, because if you keep it activated while you start doing other things, you probably end up having animations in things that you prefer better to not have animation. It can cause several interesting things. All right, so here you can see that we are more or less making it the same highness. I will explain later what the curves mean. All right, so once we see this, I would like to show you how to use the timeline, right? Because it has some features that other softwares don't have, or even if they had it, is much difficult to configure. Here in Blender is very easy to set up. And one of the reasons is probably that we, for accessing the keyframes, we have a different editor than the timeline. So in the timeline we have different features. So one of them is, for example, that well, here we have the timeline, and we can see the start of the timeline and the end of the timeline. We can change this by changing here the numbers of the end and start. What this will be doing is that when the animation reaches that point, the end point will go to the start again. So it's very useful when we have a long animation but we want to focus in a little area of the animation, right? So we can press Alt A for play the animation. We can press Alt A again to pause it, or we can, while it's playing, we can press Escape and it will go to the previous frame where we started to play the animation. Right? We can also use these controls here to play backwards, or we can go to the previous or next keyframe, or to the beginning or the end of the animation. Also, here we can change between keyframes with the arrow keys in the keyboard. Right? Left and right will let us move ourselves into the keyframes, previous and after, keyframe by keyframe, and with up and down we will jump between the keyframes of the selected objects. This is very useful when doing animations, so you can just jump to the next keyframe to edit it, and not to be going keyframe by keyframe looking for where is the next keyframe. And another little trick here is that you can press Alt and scroll the mouse wheel to move yourself between the keyframes. This is pretty nice also. Alright, so we go to the frame 0, and once we know how to use this, well, I forgot how to set also the start and end keyframes. You can just place the cursor where you want the animation to end and press E. So you can also select where you want it to start and press S. So S from start set the start of the animation, and E sets the end of the animation. There are other interesting features, like you can have markers and things like that, but we are not going to enter in that advanced stuff in this tutorial. Now I'm going to show you the Dopesheet. So what is the Dopesheet? Dopesheet is something that was very traditionally used for defining the timing of the animations in traditional animation. Basically, horizontally we have the time, alright, and vertically we just have the objects of the scene. So we have here a summary, which is all the scene together, the keyframes that are in the scene. We have here an object, which is the sphere in this case. Here we have the action that has inside it the keyframes of the animation that is playing. We are not going to enter in that also in this tutorial, but actions are a group of keyframes that defines a given action to an object. Alright, so we can have different actions for the same object into the same scene. So we can play them as desired. And then we can even, here, if you can see Dopesheet, we can go to the action editor and define actions. If you can see here, this is the sphere action because it's the current one, but we can right here, the bouncing ball. And now this action is the bouncing ball action. We can edit it. We go to the Dopesheet, and here we can see now that this is the bouncing ball action. And inside the action, we have the channels of that action. Nice. Then, just for you to know, that actions, we can edit them like a video editor, like taking two different actions. Imagine a character. We have two different actions, running and walking, and we can combine them together into the NLA editor, which is the nonlinear animation editor. But as I said, that is advanced stuff, and here we are going to focus only into the keyframes and how to use them. So here, a thing that I want to show you is what this line means, this orange line between keyframes. Well, here, as you can see, we have keyframes, no line between them, but here we have this line. That is because in this channel there is no change at all between the keyframes. So it's a quick way to show you at naked eye that between these keyframes there is no change, right? So you know that this probably, if you want to clean a little your keyframes, you can delete this one here, and the result will be exactly the same. But sometimes you prefer to have it. This is useful when you have a lot of keyframes and you want to really know which of them are changing and which of them aren't. All right, so here in this case, as we only animated the C location, okay, the height of the position of the model, the sphere in this case, here you can see that this position actually changed, but the rest of the channel didn't change at all. And well, that's interesting. So what is the Dopesheet for? It allows us to change the timing of keyframes. So let's press play, for example. You can see that it's moving, and we can just go ahead. Let me select the end right here in the next keyframe. Press play again, and here we can see that we can move the keyframes just by right-clicking and dragging. Right? You can see also that in the curves is affecting in real time, and also in the animation. You can see that if I put this keyframe closer to the first one, this first animation is faster and then it's slower. Or I can just put this other closer here, and now the whole animation will be faster. Other things that we can do here in the Dopesheet is to select several keyframes and press scale to scale them. This is very useful for making some animations slower or faster. Also, we can use things like the B to box selection several keys, and as I said here in the Dopesheet summary, you can deactivate it if you want here. This way you will see all the keyframes from all the objects by separated. But if you activate summary, you will see here some kind of that's it, a summary of all the keyframes that you have in the scene. So something that I like to use usually is to activate this this cursor here. What this does is to show only the keyframes for the objects that we have selected. So it's useful when we have several objects with animations, but we only want to see here in the summary and all these keyframes, we want only to see the one that we have selected. All right. So now after watching this, I'm going to show you how to change this panel here to this here. Could be very easy just by going here and select the Dopesheet, but I'm going to show you a trick. So we have this here. We have only to show the selected keyframes, so we are not accidentally going to change other keyframes from other objects that we don't have selected. So we can close this, so you can only see the summary. And we do now, just in this corner where we use it to split a view, we are going to press Ctrl, keep it pressed, and drag it. Sorry, I need to do this because it was going to show me the menu. So press Ctrl, and with it pressed, just left click and drag. And you can see that the cursor now is different. It's like a swap. I think it's called swap, for swap different views. And if we release it here over the timeline, wow, we already have the timeline, the Dopesheet here, sorry, and the timeline up here. So we're going to do this. So now we have a timeline here with the time horizontally, and we can change the keyframes, just as in Maya, Max, or whatever, and even with more functionality. Keep in mind that the scaling option depends on the cursor position. As you can see, right now I have it here. If I scale, the keyframes will go there. If I have it here, the keyframes will shrink to that point, right? There are more tools, but this is the basics. All right. Right now I'm just only showing you the basic functionality. Later we are going to use it practically, and you will probably understand better what each thing does. All right. Now finally we are going to the curve editor. So the curve editor, here we have some curves, and the curves define the motion. All right. Internally, each channel of the object, like can be, for example, this blue one is the set channel of the object. We can see that it goes down and it goes up then. Why I use the bouncing ball and an animation into the highness of the position of the object? Because in the z-axis, in the z-axis, we are seeing it as if it's just like drawing the same motion that we are going to see in the viewport. With other axes, it's probably not as easier to see when you don't know what this is. All right, if you are not used to work with curves, it's a bit difficult. Basically, what curves does is to let us define the interpolation between two positions. All right, so if you can see here, here also I like to see always here with this button only the curves of the object that I have selected. And also I like to activate here the only selected curve keyframes. This prevents us to select keyframes from curves that we do not want to retouch. So in this case, we know that we want to change the set location, all right, because it's this curve. So this allows us to select only the keyframes from this curve. So let's go here. We can see, press play to see the animation, and right now we can see that the curve, you can see the movement of the ball that is going up and down, but it accelerates in the middle of the movement, and it slows down in the upper part and in the lower part, right? This is because here the curve is smooth, all right? But what happens if I do here a spike? Look at that, look how it changed. It starts suddenly, then slows down, and then goes up smoothly. So the curves define, even if the poses, the main positions are the same ones, the curves define how Blender interpolates the keyframes, the frames, sorry, between the keyframes. So that allows us to control the interpolation, right? Some people at the beginning, they don't want to fiddle around with the curves and all that, but once you start working with them and you understand them and what they do, they are really powerful, because you can achieve things that would take a lot of time to achieve with keyframes, and probably in a more clean way. So let's see what options we have here in the curves. The curves horizontally, they display time. As you can see here, we have the markers with the number keyframes, the frame numbers, sorry. So 0, 20, 40, whatever. And vertically, it shows up the value of that curve. So here, as you can see, in the z-axis, the z-axis, we have a value. Always that we move or rotate or scale an object, we are given a value to that transform. So here what it shows is the value of that keyframe. So we are going to select this keyframe, and if we press N, it shows here the active keyframe properties. So you can see the interpolation type. We're going to see that later. And and here we have the frame Okay, the frame in which this keyframe is happening, in this case is 0 because it's 0 here. And finally we have the value, right? The value right now is at 7. If we increase it, the ball will be higher. Also here we have the handles control, right? The handles are these things to control how it interpolates. So here you define where the the value, the highness of that given handle. Right now this is the one that we are controlling, and also here you define the keyframe in which it's positioned. So this defines the smooth. If we put them closer, they may some kind of a spike, and this will create some motion like this. Boom! You can see it's much stronger. Or we can just give some more space to them. Also, another little thing that you need to keep in mind here is that you can control these keyframes and the curves with the normal transform tools. With G, you can drag. Okay, you can see how the animation changes. And you can also constrain to an axis. You can press G and X to move only in the time, or you can press G and Y to move also in the value of that keyframe. Also, you can use scaling to scale that handles, right? So if you scale them down, you achieve that spike, or you can scale it up to make them smoother. Also, you can rotate it with R, and well, this is really useful. So I think this is all for now. No, it isn't. It isn't. We need to explain the types of curves. Let's stop the animation. So the types of curves, as you've seen before here, the interpolation type here is Bezier. Bezier is this kind of curves that we can control with the handles of the vertices. But we probably want to have another kind of interpolation. For example, the constant interpolation. Right here, give it in constant. We can define it here, or we can just press T and select it. Right, so I select all the keyframes, press T, and constant, and you can see these spikes. What this does is to it has no interpolation. It shows only the poses. This is particularly useful when we are animating a character, for example, and we want to focus in the poses, and we don't want the interpolation to to keep our attention. So this way you can only see the poses, the basic poses that you are manually entering, and when you have them, you can just go back here, press T and select Bezier, for example, and you already have an automatically defined curves. Alright, so then you can start working on the interpolation once you have the poses well defined. And the last one is the linear. Linear doesn't let us use handles. It's only a line from one keyframe to the next one. As you can see here, always a constant speed. Alright. Also, another thing, we're going to the Bezier again. Other thing with the Bezier, let's keep it here so you can see how it affects the animation. If we press B, okay, all of these things we can also use them from here. Alright, interpolation mode or handle type here from the key menu. With V, we can define how the handles are working at the beginning. So here, for example, I like to use vector, which is some kind of linear. What it does is align each handle separately. You can see that the sides are independent now. This is very useful for creating corners into our curves. And what it does is to align this orientation to the previous keyframe and this one to the next one. So this helps us create corners there. You can see here that now in the upper part of the animation, it's slowing down and it's smooth, but when it reaches the floor, it's just like bouncing. That's what we will need later for the animation. All right, and now we can even increase that spike. Right, you can see this exactly defines, once you start using them and you get used to them, you will understand what this means. You can see that this changes the speed of the animation. So the more flat the line is, the less speed it will have, and the more vertical, the more fast it will move. So here, as you can see, it's something progressive. All right. Other types of you know, setting up the handles are, for example, aligned. Right. This will make I don't know in which it bases. For making that automatic, they are more or less based in the next and previous keyframes. Probably this happens because it's not in the middle exactly, so they are a little rotated. But once we start moving them, they become a custom handles. Or we can select, I don't know, auto clamped. Auto clamped are a handle that if we move this keyframe, you can see that this handle also automatically clamp to not surpass the next keyframe. Okay, because if we surpass it, it probably don't behave as we expect. And now, yes, we can go to the Dopesheet. I'm going to switch it back here, so probably you can understand everything better. Here we keep the timeline, and here you can also access to some of that tools, not to control the handles, but you can just select the type of interpolation. This is very fast when we want to make, for example, a turntable of a model to show it, and we just select the two keyframes of the rotation of 360 degrees, press T and put them as linear. So the speed of the rotation is completely constant. And now we're going to start the practical exercise to make this ball you know, bounce, which is a very basic exercise, but it will allow you to see how to use these tools practically. Come on. So here we have these three keyframes already, and what I'm going to do is actually to delete this one. We're going to select the first two, and here in the Dopesheet, one cool functionality is that it allows you to duplicate and override or whatever keyframes. So Shift MD, and we can just change the keyframes. So place them more or less at the same distance, again and again. So now, instead of one, here what I'm doing is with Control pressed and middle mouse button, we can zoom in or out from the curves or Dopesheet. Right? This is a way to very quickly adjust our view to what we want to see. So as you can see now, it's some kind of a wave pattern, and we have several bounces. What we need to do here is to select this curve, and now we're going to see, let's put this down with G and Y like this, and each one of them will be lower. That's it. Let's go to the end. Let me check this. There's a lot of so to the end. Let's play the animation, and you can see that it's really slow. So what we need to do is to take this and scale them down to the beginning. Let's put it something like here, less than 100 frames. Alt A again, and it's now faster. As you can see, each time it goes in a lower position. It's time that it bounces. All right. Now the next step is probably to select these ones, and these are the keyframes where the ball bounces, so they need to be like corners. So we press V and we select vector. It looks much natural now. Anyway, now what is failing is that all the bounces have the same duration, and we need each one of them, as they are lower each time, each one of them will be also smaller, faster. So first of all, let's select all this. We can try to do it here. So stop the animation, and here we have 1, 2 in the floor. These ones, we can select all of them with B and drag in, and here we put them closer. Now we can select these ones that are after the next bounce and make them even closer, so each time is faster. And now the two last one, which is this these two keyframes, are the last bounce. From here we scale them a little down, and let's see what we have now. We end the animation here. You can see what we have. Alright, now let's clean a little the curves. And what I mean to clean them is that, as you can see here, they do some kind of linear, and we want them to be more like the bounce is faster, and when they are in the top, they are smoother, they are slower movement. So we select these ones, and as you can see, the handles go under the curve, and we want them to be more like this. Right, let's play it. Okay, this is much more natural. Now at the end, it's very fast. We're going to move this a little, one keyframe. Okay, and what we need here is to go here to these last ones. What's happening there? Okay, here what happened is that I moved this keyframe here, but I moved only one channel. So now in the summary and here we have two different keyframes. So we moved this one here, and it's already overwritten. You could see how this line here is showing us that between these keyframes there is no movement at all, right? Because I just moved only one channel. So if we move this one, it disappears. It helps us spot things that we actually don't want to change, and move it here. All right, now I need to duplicate these ones, move them like this to put them a little closer. You can see that here, for example, we have 46, 1, 2, 3, 4 keyframes, and here we have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and I want even one else with 2 keyframes between them. Now here you can see that this is not very good. Okay, let's put the end of the animation right here. We can also disable this transform gizmo, so it's not taking our attention. And we can even activate here render only into the display, only render, so we can see only the object. And in C, I'm going to put it in smooth. So here we are only watching the sphere. Now here we go again to here, and we need to make these ones smaller. And you can see what happens. This is because we duplicated this this keyframe with a given handle setup. So now we need to just retouch them a little. So retouch them so the curves are nicely as we want them. And you can see that now we have a much more natural bouncing ball. Let's watch it. You can see that it stops progressively. We can even make these ones closer, like this, or why not duplicate them like this and like this. Let's go to the curve and modify it a little. Here, and this one like this. So as you can see, more or less what we do here is to define how the ball is bouncing, okay? And you can think about it as a drawing. Here you can even make it start slower. And yes, we over the time the ball is making this movement in the Z axis. That's why I use the Z axis, because in X or Y it's more difficult to see, but in a bouncing ball it's very easy to see the effect here. Alright, the more smooth these lines are here, the curves are on the top, the slower the ball will move when going up and starting to go down again. So let's see what happens now. Here we have our bouncing ball. Nice. Now another thing that we could do is to select all the keyframes, and you will see how fast we can change the weight of the ball. If we make them closer, you can see that the handles some kind of adapted, but maybe we need to go into them and work on them again. You can see here strange things, but well, now to show you faster, I just scale them, and you can see that now the ball is like much more heavier because it just falls faster, right? Also, well, it's not really okay, because we would need to take this this motion and just decrease the amount of bounces and decrease also the height of each bounce, right? Because a very heavy ball wouldn't bounce so higher. All right. Also, we have the opposite case. We can scale them down, and you can see a very light ball because it takes too much time to fall and go up again. But this is the normal one. So as I said, a very basic exercise, very simple, very mainstream, is one of the most used animation tutorials out there, but I'm sure that it will help you understand the tools that we have in Blender, the Dopesheet, the curve editor or graph editor as it is called here. You can see the graph editor. And well, I think that with this example you can understand these curves. At the beginning, for people, is not very useful. It's not. It's a bit difficult to figure out how exactly these curves work. But once you get used to them, you will see that they are really powerful, and without them, 3D animation wouldn't be the same. Okay, because this way you can control, because you put keyframes into the object's animation, but the computer, or Blender in this case, is taking care of the interpolation, and the only way in which you can control that interpolation, at least for now, is by using curves. There are another alternatives. There is an add-on for Blender that allows you to show the trajectory of the object and allows you to change things in the trajectory, to change the speed and all that, but it's something for what I've seen a little experimental yet. It's not included in the trunk, and I don't know how it's the development. I don't really remember how it's called, and that add-on, but well, for now the most useful way to control the interpolations is the curves. So I recommend you to check it. I recommend you to understand them well, to practice with them, so you can reach a good status with your animations. So this is everything for this tutorial, and hopefully this is one tutorial that I promised to you a long time ago, the animation one, but well, here is it. Here it is finally, and hopefully soon I will release the ones with basic rigging and things like that. So as I said, I want to cover all the basics in Blender, the compositor and everything. Only Python won't be covered because I don't like. It's not that I don't like it; it's that I don't know how to make scripts. So so yeah, but the rest of the things about Blender, you can expect them to be explained here at Blendtuts, but well, it will take time, as I have very little free time, and well, Blender is changing so fast that I really think that it is starting to be necessary that I start again from the basics, from the very basics, because a lot of things have changed already. So, well, see you in the next tutorial, and happy blending. See you soon.